Debisi Adeyemi stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the vibrant Ankara blazer that hugged her full figure perfectly. She had learned long ago to dress not for approval, but for herself. Her phone buzzed with another notification from the Global Fashion Summit in Seoul. 3 weeks from now, she'd be presenting her plus-size fashion line to international investors. A smile spread across her face. This was what she'd worked for. Years of building her brand, Curves of Lagos, fighting against an industry that wanted to erase women like her. Tonight though, she needed to finish packing and silence the voices of doubt that occasionally crept in. The same voices that sounded like her exes. Men who'd whispered sweet promises before handing her diet pills and gym schedules. Meanwhile, across the world in Seoul, Park Jin-young sat in his corner office on the 47th floor, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. The anniversary had passed 3 days ago. 3 years since Yuna had left him standing at the altar. 3 years since he discovered she'd been planning her escape with director Choi, his business partner and closest friend since university. He'd transformed that pain into empire building. His tech company, Nexus Innovations, now dominated Asian markets. He'd become exactly what everyone expected. Cold. Efficient. Untouchable. His assistant had forwarded the summit participant list an hour ago, and he'd been staring at one profile picture ever since. Debisi Adeyemi, founder and CEO of Curves of Lagos. The woman in the photo radiated something he couldn't name. Confidence, maybe. Or power. She wore her curves like armor, her smile broad and fearless. Her eyes held challenge and warmth simultaneously. He told himself his interest was purely professional. African fashion was an emerging market worth exploring. But something about her presence on the screen made him feel something he'd forgotten existed. Anticipation. Debisi zipped her suitcase with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to travel light but pack smart. Fabric samples, business cards, her mother's gold jewelry for good luck, and coconut oil because Korean winter air was notoriously dry. She caught her reflection one last time before leaving. The woman staring back had survived being called too fat for love, too ambitious for marriage, too confident for her own good. She'd stopped shrinking herself years ago when she realized the problem wasn't her size. It was their imagination. Korea would be another stage. Another opportunity to prove that beauty had no size limit. What she didn't know was that she was about to meet a man who would challenge everything she'd built her walls to protect. The Seoul Grand Palace Hotel glittered like something from a fantasy. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across marble floors. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns moved like choreographed dancers. Park Jin-young arrived early, positioning himself near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. His friend and business associate, Director Yang, tried engaging him in conversation about semiconductor stocks, but Minho's attention was elsewhere. He was scanning for her. When Debisi entered 40 minutes late, the room shifted. She wore an Ankara print gown that flowed like water over her curves, the fabric a riot of oranges, golds, and deep purples. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo with gold accessories catching the light. She moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd long stopped apologizing for taking up space. Jin-young's breath caught. He'd seen beautiful women before. Seoul was full of them. But this wasn't just beauty. This was presence. Authority. She laughed at something someone said, the sound rich and unguarded, and he found himself walking toward her before he'd consciously decided to move. Debisi had noticed him immediately. Hard not to. Park Jin-young looked like he'd been carved from expensive marble. Tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, an expression that suggested he'd never been told no in his entire life. She recognized the type. Wealthy. Powerful. Emotionally unavailable. They usually approached women like her out of curiosity, like she was an exotic experience to collect. When he finally reached her, extending his hand, she was ready. Park Jin-young, he introduced himself. Nexus Innovations. She shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze directly. Debisi Adeyemi. Curves of Lagos. I've heard of you, he said, something almost like a smile touching his lips. Have you? She raised an eyebrow. I don't get starstruck easily, she added, turning back to examine a display of Korean traditional jewelry. Nice suit though. The comment caught him off guard. He blinked, recalibrating. That wasn't how these conversations usually went. They spent the rest of the evening carefully avoiding each other while somehow always aware of exactly where the other person was standing. She didn't chase. Didn't flirt. Didn't perform. And that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. The next morning, Jin-young found himself reviewing her business portfolio. He watched interviews where she spoke passionately about body positivity, about African fashion innovation, about creating space for women the industry forgot. He told himself it was research. Professional interest. Nothing more. But he watched 3 interviews before his morning coffee got cold. Back in her hotel suite, Debisi sipped palm wine tea and scrolled through messages. Her phone exploded with DMs from men back home. Debisi, you're glowing. Seoul looks good on you. When are you coming back? She rolled her eyes and ignored every single one. She'd come to Korea for business. For herself. Not for romance. Not for games. Not for another man who'd love her in private but be embarrassed by her in public. Until Park Jin-young. She couldn't quite figure him out. Couldn't tell if he was dangerous or different. And honestly, she wasn't sure which possibility scared her more. Park Jin-young prided himself on control. His life ran on systems. Meetings at specific times. Emails answered within hours. Decisions made with data, never emotion. But by Wednesday, his carefully constructed routine was crumbling. He'd rewritten the same email 4 times. Missed 2 phone calls. Arrived 10 minutes late to a board meeting. All because he kept thinking about her. The way she'd looked in that dress. The way she didn't try to impress him. The way she'd walked away without looking back. His phone buzzed with a message from Director Yang. Panel schedule updated. You're co-presenting with Debisi Adeyemi on Friday. Topic is innovation and identity. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Friday suddenly felt too far away. Across Seoul in a temporary studio space in Gangnam, Debisi moved between fabric samples and sketches, old Nigerian Afrobeat playing from her speaker. She needed to stay focused. Her pitch to a Korean manufacturing company could transform her entire business. Global distribution. International partnerships. This was everything she'd worked for. But her mind kept drifting to Jin-young. That stare at the gala had been intense. Not leering. Not judgmental. Just intensely focused, like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. She'd dated men with intense stares before. Men who'd looked at her like a project. A fixer-upper. They'd loved her until they wanted to change her. She'd built walls high enough to keep those memories out. But Jin-young's intensity felt different. Less arrogant. More genuine. And genuine attention was more dangerous because it was harder to dismiss. Friday arrived with electric anticipation. The Global Fashion Summit conference hall buzzed with hundreds of attendees. Entrepreneurs, designers, tech leaders, all gathered for the Innovation and Identity panel. Park Jin-young arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His expression remained carefully neutral. Debisi arrived exactly 7 minutes late, and Jin-young was grateful he'd arrived early to see her entrance. She wore a fitted emerald jumpsuit with gold accessories that caught the light with every movement. When she sat beside him on the panel stage, he caught the faint scent of shea butter and something floral he couldn't identify. The moderator began with introductions. Jin-young spoke first, his presentation flawless and data-driven. Then Debisi leaned into her microphone and smiled at the audience. People think innovation starts with technology. But I believe it starts with courage. The courage to see yourself completely and create from that authentic place. Whether you're a skinny girl in Seoul or a curvy woman from Lagos, your identity is your superpower. The room went silent. Even Jean turned slightly to look at her. This wasn't just confidence. This was command. Leadership. Truth. Later that evening, the after-panel reception was held on a rooftop overlooking the Han River. City lights reflected off the water like fallen stars. Jazz played softly in the background. Jin-young found Debisi near the railing, speaking with a Korean fashion blogger who couldn't stop complimenting her work. "You speak like you've already won," the blogger said, clearly impressed. Debisi laughed, warm and genuine. "I speak like someone who stopped asking permission to exist." As the blogger walked away, Jin-young approached. "That was powerful," he said. Debisi turned to face him fully. "You mean the speech or the fact that I wore this outfit without seeking validation?" "Both," he admitted, allowing himself a small smile. She sipped her drink and met his eyes directly. "Let me guess. You're curious now. Not used to someone like me. Not used to women who don't make themselves smaller." "I'm not used to many things about you," he said honestly. "And that bothers you?" Her tone was gentle but probing. He looked out over the river. "It shouldn't. But it does." Her expression softened slightly. "Then ask yourself this. Is what you're feeling fear or fascination?" He turned to respond but she was already walking away, leaving him standing there watching her go. And that night, for the first time since Yuna left him at the altar, Jean didn't dream about abandonment. He dreamed about possibility. The next morning, Debisi was reviewing contract proposals when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it expecting a work message. Instead, she saw a text from Kunal. "Hey Debs. Been thinking about you. Can we talk?" Kunal. The man who told her she had such a pretty face if only she'd lose some weight. Who'd bought her slimming teas for her birthday. Who'd suggested she skip dessert every single time they went out. She stared at the message for exactly 3 seconds before locking her phone and tossing it aside. Not today. She had a showroom presentation to prepare. A Korean tech consortium was interested in her smart sizing technology. There was no time for old regrets pretending to be romance. But by afternoon, the messages multiplied. Not just Kunal. Tun texted. Then Emika. Even Femi, who'd once compared her thighs to tree trunks as a joke. Suddenly they all saw her. Because now Park Jin-young, Seoul's most eligible bachelor, was publicly interested. He'd mentioned her in press interviews. Stood beside her at events. Looked at her like she mattered. And some men don't want you until they see someone else does. Meanwhile in Seoul, Jin-young experienced an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Something tight and uncomfortable. He wasn't a jealous man. At least, he'd never thought he was. But when he scrolled social media and found a Nigerian gossip blog showing Debisi on a video call with some guy labeled her ex-boyfriend, his jaw clenched involuntarily. He zoomed in on the photo. The man was smiling like he'd been given a second chance. Jin-young texted his driver without thinking it through. Later that night, Debisi emerged from the shower wrapped in her robe, hair dripping, when someone knocked on her hotel door. She looked through the peephole and froze. Park Jin-young stood in the hallway wearing a gray coat, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine and like he was about 2 seconds from doing something completely irrational. She opened the door slowly. Yes. Who was he? Jin-young asked without preamble. Which one? Her tone was careful. The one in the video. The one who keeps messaging you. An ex. Is he bothering you? He's not your concern. That's where you're wrong. He stepped closer. She laughed shortly, shaking her head. You don't own me, Park Jin-young. I don't want to own you, his voice dropped lower. I just want you to know I'm not walking away. I'm not like them. Exactly, her tone sharpened. You're worse. You don't even know me and suddenly you're showing up like you have a say in my life. He didn't flinch. Then let me know you. I want to know everything. Her breath caught. Not just because of his words but because of the raw sincerity in his eyes. This wasn't the cold businessman she'd met 2 weeks ago. She stepped back inside, closing the door halfway. Good night, Park Jin-young. He didn't argue. Just nodded and left. But they both knew this wasn't over. A week later at a conference after-party, Debisi arrived in a stunning red silk dress with an open back. She hadn't expected to see Kunal there, but he'd apparently flown in from Lagos claiming business in Korea. He cornered her near the bar, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. I made a mistake, Debs. You're the one I should never have let go. Before she could respond, someone stepped smoothly between them. Park Jin-young. His hand rested casually on the small of her back. She's with me, he said evenly. Move along. Kunal laughed. You think just because you're rich she'll stay? No, Minho replied calmly. I think because I respect her, she might. Kunal shifted away, and Debisi gently removed Jin-young's hand from her waist. Thank you, she said sincerely. Kunal's been persistent. At least now he'll back off thinking I'm taken. I owe you one. Jin-young saw his opening. To return the favor, would you have dinner with me tomorrow? She smiled. Yes. Then she walked away to network with other attendees. The next evening, Jin-young sat at a private rooftop restaurant with Seoul's skyline glittering like diamonds scattered across velvet. He adjusted his watch for the third time. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But tonight his palms were actually damp. Then she walked in wearing a deep purple gown that hugged every curve. Her skin glowed like polished bronze under the lights. I'm sorry I'm late, she said with that megawatt smile. Your perfect timing, he replied, pulling out her chair. She laughed, settling into her seat. I almost didn't come. Thought you'd be another one of those guys. What guys? The ones who think plus size means less valuable. He paused, really looking at her. Debisi, I see more value in you than in all my company's assets combined. She blushed, feeling unexpectedly young. They ordered and as dinner progressed, the conversation deepened. Jin-young opened up first. I was left at the altar, he said quietly. Debisi blinked in surprise. You? He nodded slowly. My fiancée disappeared the night before our wedding. Found out later she'd been cheating with my business partner. After that, I decided being alone was safer. Debisi was quiet for a moment, then sipped her wine. I used to chase love like it was a prize I had to earn. Men told me I'd be perfect if I just lost weight. I drank all the slimming teas. Starved myself. Punished my body at the gym. Then one day I looked in the mirror and realized I wasn't the problem. They were. He looked at her like she'd revealed something sacred. So you stopped dating? She nodded. Decided I'd rather eat jollof rice alone in peace than cry in front of someone who saw me as a project. He reached across the table and took her hand gently. You're not a project, Debisi. You're a masterpiece. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. They stepped onto the balcony, the Seoul wind playing with the edges of her dress. Jin-young cleared his throat. I know we've only just met, but tonight feels significant. You're strong. You're authentic. You didn't try to impress me, and that impressed me more than anything. Debisi chuckled softly. Are you always this smooth? He grinned. Only when I mean it. Be my girlfriend, he said directly. No changing required. I want you exactly as you are. Debisi stared at him, heart racing. You're certain? He stepped closer. I've never been more certain about anything. She inhaled deeply, then smiled. Okay, Mr. Billionaire. But just so you know, I'm not doing 5 a.m. workouts. He laughed. Good. I'd rather sleep in. With you. They leaned in slowly, inevitably, and kissed. And in that moment, two people who'd stopped believing in love began believing again. A few weeks later, Jin-young received an unwelcome visitor at his office. Yuna. His ex-fiancée who destroyed him 3 years ago. She looked stunning as always, perfectly polished and cold as winter. I saw you in the news, she said, sitting without invitation. Interesting choice. You've downgraded significantly. Leave, he said, standing. Now. Oh, Jin-young, she smirked. You don't actually think that woman fits beside you? This is Korea. Look at her. It's a PR disaster waiting to happen. The moment she left, Jin-young felt sick. He knew Yuna would find a way to get to Debisi. Hours later, he stood outside Debisi's apartment with the spare key she'd given him. But when he entered, the space was empty. No signs of her anywhere. Panic spread through his chest like wildfire. He called her 3 times. No answer. Tried her assistant, her hotel contact, her showroom coordinator, even Director Young. Nothing. Debisi wasn't the type to run from anything. Not business challenges, not criticism, not even exes. She faced the world head-on. Unless someone had crossed a line. And he already knew who. He drove himself to Yuna's glass-walled office building, rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. She was sipping coffee when he entered, looking smug. You came, she said sweetly. Let me guess. She ran after realizing she doesn't belong in your world. You went to her, Jin-young said, voice dangerously low. She stood. I simply told her the truth. Someone needed to. You're a public figure. You can't be seen playing house with what was the phrase. Oh yes, plus-size activism. The words cut through him. You don't get to talk about her, he snapped. You don't know her. I know why you chose her, Yuna said bitterly. She's the opposite of me. I chose her because she's real, he said sharply. Something you've never been. She flinched visibly. He leaned forward, voice razor-sharp. If I ever discover you've approached her again, if you so much as text her, I will personally ensure every door you've walked through in this city closes permanently. Her jaw tensed. You destroy me? For her. He smiled coldly. No. I destroy you for me. Because of what you did. She's just the reason I finally see clearly. Hours later, his assistant called. I tracked her. She booked a train to Busan. A quiet coastal town. She's staying at a guest house. If you hurry, you can catch the next train. It leaves in 15 minutes. Jin-young didn't pack. He just ran. That night on Busan's coastline, Debisi sat on the beach barefoot, toes buried in cool sand. She hated that Yuna's words had touched something deep inside her. A place she thought she'd healed. But self-worth, she realized, wasn't a one-time victory. It was a daily battle. No matter how far she'd come, there were still ghosts whispering that she wasn't the one men stayed for. But she also knew this. She hadn't run from Jin-young. She was giving him space to choose. If he wanted her, all of her, he needed to prove he could weather the storm. So when she heard footsteps approaching behind her, she didn't turn. She waited. I told myself I'd never chase love again, he said from behind her. But I'd chase you to the ends of the earth if necessary. She didn't move. I should have protected you sooner, he continued. From her, from every voice that made you doubt what I already know. That you're everything to me. She finally turned to look at him. He looked completely undone. Disheveled. Real. No one's ever fought for me, she whispered. I will, he said, stepping closer. Every single day, for as long as you'll let me. Debisi stood slowly, brushing sand from her dress. I'm not perfect. I don't want perfect, he said. I want you. All of you. She studied him silently for a long moment. Then finally, she leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. When they stepped out of the train station together the next day, camera flashes exploded around them. Jin-young had offered to take a private car directly to his penthouse, but Debisi said no. She wanted to walk publicly. So they walked through Seoul Station, through the stairs and whispers and raised eyebrows. Debisi walked beside him, chin high, shoulders back, in a burgundy-fitted coat that made her glow against the morning light. Jin-young said nothing, but every glance, every protective hover of his hand near her back, told the world exactly where he stood. She is mine. I chose her. Look all you want. By afternoon, every major outlet had the photos. Park Jin-young spotted with Nigerian designer. Romantic relationship or power move? Social media exploded. He's too high profile for someone like her. Why does she carry herself like royalty though? I kind of love it. Wait, are they actually in love? Debisi expected backlash. What surprised her was the wave of support. Women, Korean women, Nigerian women, African women, international fans, flooded her messages. Thank you for existing confidently in your body. For the first time, her body wasn't the topic. Her presence was. And that felt revolutionary. A week later, a major talk show reached out. They wanted Debisi and Jin-young to appear together. On set, Debisi sat beside Jin-young under bright studio lights. The host leaned forward with a polite smile. Debisi, Korea has never seen a couple like you and Jin-young. You're not the typical image beside men of his status. Do you feel like you're breaking barriers? Debisi didn't flinch. I'm not trying to break anything. I'm simply refusing to shrink. If that makes people uncomfortable, they should examine why. The audience gasped softly. Jin-young's hand found hers under the table. The host turned to him. And you, Jin-young? How does your family feel about this relationship? He paused, then leaned forward. I've spent my life being told what image to maintain. I followed all the rules and it left me empty. He glanced at Debisi. She gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Love. And I'll protect that with everything I have. For a moment, the studio was silent. Then applause thundered through the space. The air felt heavy as Jin-young pulled into his parents' private estate. Debisi wore a rich navy dress embroidered with subtle Nigerian patterns. She looked elegant. Still, she felt the weight of uncertainty the moment she stepped out of the car. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Yes, Jin-young said honestly, offering his hand. She took it. Inside, his mother greeted them first. She did not smile. Annyeonghaseyo, Debisi said softly, bowing respectfully. His mother gave the faintest nod. You've practiced Korean. I respect your culture, Debisi replied. She doesn't need to prove anything, Jin-young added quickly, his voice edged with steel. His father appeared, stern and unreadable. Let's eat. Every course felt like a battle. Jin-young's mother asked polite but cutting questions. So you design clothes for larger women? How does that translate to Korea's refined aesthetic preferences? And Nigeria? Is that near South Africa? Debisi answered every question with calm poise. Yes, I work in plus-size fashion. Not from lack of options, but from pride. And no, Nigeria is its own country with its own rich history. Thank you. Jin-young's knuckles were white around his chopsticks. His father finally spoke directly. Do you expect to marry into this family? Debisi set down her cup carefully. No, she said clearly. I expect your son to choose his life freely. If that life includes me, I'll meet him at the altar. Not before. The room went completely silent. Then for the first time, his mother really looked at Debisi. Truly saw her. No smile appeared. But the judgment softened. Outside after dinner, Jin-young slammed the car door with frustration. I'm sorry. That was terrible. Debisi was quiet. Then she turned to him. You knew they'd react that way, didn't you? Yes. Then don't apologize, she said. He looked at her, startled. I'm still here, she said simply. Debisi hadn't been back to Lagos for nearly a year. Not since her business expansion had taken off and her world had started spinning on a global axis. But even with success, one truth remained. Home never stopped calling. And now with rumors circulating in Lagos about her, about a Korean billionaire, about an old flame who wouldn't let go, she couldn't stay away any longer. What surprised her was that Jin-young insisted on coming. The moment they touched down in Lagos, the heat hit Jin-young like a physical force. Thick and alive. Debisi stepped off the plane in a white and turquoise Ankara dress, sunglasses on, but her body language relaxed in a way he'd never seen. This was her territory. Her rhythm. The sounds, the voices, the energy pulsing through the air. This was Debisi in full bloom. He watched locals recognize her. Some waved respectfully. Others whispered behind their hands. Her success had made her famous. Her relationship had made her more famous. At their hotel, messages started flooding in. Anonymous at first. He doesn't belong here. You forgot your roots. Debisi, you'll regret being with this Korean man. Jin-young noticed her posture stiffen. What's happening? He asked. Someone's stirring trouble, Debisi sighed. Probably someone from my past who thinks I still owe them closure. She didn't say it, but he knew who she meant. Kunal. The ex who'd mocked her weight privately but paraded her publicly as a trophy. One morning after Jin-young had gone back to Seoul, they woke to a viral blog post and video that nearly destroyed them. A false leak of financial records, heavily edited and clearly manipulated, accusing Debisi of fraud. Claiming she used her relationship with Minho to cover shady business deals in both Nigeria and Korea. By morning, #Debisi fraud was trending in 2 countries. Fashion brands started pulling back. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Debisi stood in her Lagos showroom, hands shaking as her assistant read the 3rd International headline. Park Jin-young's girlfriend accused of exploiting tech connections for fake fashion empire. I don't even have tech connections, she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. Everything I built from scratch. Her assistant nodded, wide-eyed. I know, but people don't care about truth when drama sells better. Debisi's stomach dropped. She knew exactly who was behind this. Kunal. He had connections in local media. And most importantly, a bruised ego. This was revenge. The question now wasn't why this happened. It was how to survive it. Meanwhile in Seoul, Jin-young stared at the headline in his office, eyes like ice. His advisors urged caution. Keep your distance, one said. Even if it's false, public association with scandal damages you. Let her release her own statement, another added. Don't get directly involved. He stood abruptly. You think I care about my image more than her dignity? They fell silent. She didn't ask me for protection, he said. But I'm giving it anyway. That night, no one expected Park Jin-young to hold a press conference. But there he was, stepping onto the podium at his corporate headquarters. Cameras flashing wildly. He wore no tie, no formal jacket. Just a simple shirt. "This will be brief," he began. "The allegations against Debisi Adeyemi are completely false. I've reviewed the data myself. The financial documents were fabricated. The video testimony has already been disproven. She is not only innocent, she is a victim of coordinated character assassination." Gasps filled the room. "Let me be absolutely clear. I will personally pursue legal action against anyone spreading these lies. My legal team has already contacted the media outlets involved." He looked directly into the cameras. "Debisi Adeyemi did not rise on my name. She is the future of global fashion. And I will burn every bridge I've built if that's what it takes to see her walk freely across hers." Silence. Then applause erupted from the back. One reporter, then two, then the entire room. Back in Lagos, Debisi watched the press conference on her phone. Tears streamed down her face. He didn't just declare her innocent. He defended her character. When he called, she didn't even say hello. Just whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. "But I needed to." Within 48 hours, the smear campaign collapsed completely. The tech company she'd pitched to not only reinstated their agreement, they increased their offer. Her online following doubled overnight. And in Lagos, a warrant for defamation was quietly issued for Kunal. He'd gone too far. But Jin-young never spoke of him again. They weren't looking back anymore. Only forward. Park Jin-young had always moved with precision and strategy. But this was different. He couldn't approach Debisi's heart with business tactics. He had to approach it with honor. He flew to Lagos again without telling her. He wasn't there for business or press. He was there to get her family's blessing. He met her grandmother in Ibadan. Ate pounded yam with his fingers. Walked barefoot into her family compound. Asked questions about Yoruba culture, about the proper way to honor a Nigerian woman. He knelt before her aunties and said, "I'm not just asking her to marry me. I'm asking permission to join her legacy." They were shocked. But moved. They gave him their blessing. Then he flew back to Seoul and sat with his father. He told him he would propose with or without their approval. His father poured tea in silence. Then finally said, "If she makes you this happy, you have our blessing." Meanwhile, despite her thriving business, Debisi still carried one fear. What if it all ends? What if he changes his mind like the others? What if this is too good to be true? That fear crept in like a shadow. Quiet but constant. She'd never been afraid to be alone. This was the first time she was afraid to be loved. A few days later, Jin-young told her they'd be attending a cultural fusion gala. A Korean-African business and arts event. Nothing unusual. She wore a silk Ankara-inspired gown with a sweetheart neckline. When they arrived at the venue, a rooftop garden strung with lanterns, she paused. There were no guests. Just music. Soft Korean gaegeum strings blending with gentle Nigerian highlife melodies. Candles everywhere. Flowers from both Seoul and Lagos. Nigerian jollof rice on one side, Korean bulgogi on the other. She turned to him slowly. "Jin-young." He dropped to one knee. No elaborate speech. Just truth. "I love you, Debisi Adeyemi. Not because you're different, but because you make me whole. Will you marry me?" Silence. Then a tear slipped down her cheek. Then she laughed. A bright, full Debisi laugh that shook the air around them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Later that night, they sat side by side on the rooftop floor, shoes off, food in their laps, the night cooling around them. "I'm still scared sometimes," she admitted softly. "So am I," he replied honestly. She leaned on his shoulder. But I choose this. I choose you. He kissed her forehead. And in that moment, there were no titles. No labels. Just a Nigerian woman and a Korean man under the stars. Very much in love and preparing for their future. The wedding invitations were sent in 3 languages. Korean, English, and Yoruba. The venue was split between 2 celebrations. Half in Lagos, half in Seoul. Debisi's traditional wedding was held at her family's compound. The chiefs arrived in full traditional regalia. Women danced under the hot sun, beads clicking rhythmically. Jin-young wore a deep blue agbada tailored perfectly for him with gold embroidery. He looked like royalty. He knelt before her elders and was asked to declare his intentions. Debisi stood radiant in a gold-wrapped iro and buba that celebrated her curves. Her coral beads gleamed beneath the fabric. When he placed the engagement gifts before her family, she whispered in Yoruba, "You are one of us now." The crowd erupted like thunder. A week later, Seoul witnessed something unprecedented. Debisi walked down the aisle in a custom hanbok. Cream and lavender silk embroidered with both peonies and traditional Nigerian adinkra symbols. Her natural curls were styled high and crowned with gold pins. Jin-young wore a modernized hanbok in silver gray with black trim. He never took his eyes off her as they exchanged vows. Thank you so much for watching this beautiful love story. If you enjoyed this journey with Debisi and Minho, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from. If you want us to create a love story from your home country or tribe, comment "I want a love story from my country" in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you.